Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Juliet, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Before we dive into the content, let me cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple engagement tools you can use. All tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your presentation area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any audio or video issues, you can find answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. Please note that a copy of today's slide deck and additional resources are available in the resource list. Please have a look and download everything that you may find useful. Also, the webinar will be recorded and sent via the email you registered with. Now, lastly, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We are here to answer you live via the chat, so don't hesitate to reach out throughout the presentation. Now, I'll give you a quick intro of our speakers. Today, we are joined by Steve Rush. He is the principal consultant at Jama Software with more than 10 years of experience in software and implementation. Over the past 4 years, Steve has worked closely with Jama's partner network and customers, focusing on the automotive industry. He also provides training and consultation to Jama customers at different stages of their Jama adoption. And with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks very much, Juliet. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about this subject. I've worked with many customers and prospects across many different verticals, and semiconductor is certainly a vertical that has its own unique set of challenges. So this subject is kind of near and dear to a lot of the conversations that I've been having, so I really hope that you find this insightful. In this webinar, we'll address some of the challenges that many semiconductor design companies are facing when kicking off SoC projects leveraging the IP that they've already developed. So hopefully the audience out there finds this timely and relevant. We'll level set a bit on the challenge itself, and then discuss 3 strategies for scaling SoC projects along with product demonstrations to support each strategies, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. First, let's start with some definitions. IPs and SoCs. What are they? What do we mean? IP cores, sometimes called IP blocks, are foundational elements for systems on chip design. So they're really modular building blocks that are designed and purpose-built and can be compiled to develop an SoC. An SoC, the system on chip, is an integrated circuit that comprises all of the system components onto one piece of silicon, which is made up of different IPs. Our SoC here contains a processor core, a memory IP, network on chip, and then multiple IPs themselves, which in and of themselves might be considered projects. When we zoom in to a particular IP, you can see the multiple components of that IP. The microcontroller that acts as the brain of the IP, designed to perform specific tasks and holds processing instructions. The ROM and SRAM, read-only memory and static access memory. The internal communication fabric, the on-chip network controlling multiple components. Interrupts, controlling electrical current flow. The I/O interface, the input-output interface, which allows IP to communicate to the outside world. You might be managing this information in a Jama project for an IP core, multiple projects for multiple IP cores, or even multiple versions of those IP cores, depending on your version management strategy. So now that we've level set a bit, let's move on to some relatable challenges that you might have found yourself in. As semiconductor companies scale, individual IP projects need to be combined onto a single piece of silicon, these SoCs. So as we saw on the last slide, different IPs may need to be combined to compile and build that SoC. Organizing and tracking which IP, and importantly, which versions of those IPs, which might be scattered across multiple repositories following different processes, can be daunting. You can imagine if you're not using a system like Jama, that might require a lot of manual effort, a lot of copy paste, a lot of data reentry, and that can feel chaotic. For folks out there that are not using Jama or just don't have a well-defined process in Jama, you might be relying on a lot of institutional knowledge when the time comes to compile these different IPs to build your SoC. Maybe your lead engineer knows which versions of the IPs you need to use or what third-party software licenses you need to monitor and update, but it's just not well documented. You don't really have a system in place to manage all of this. If someone walks out the door, a lot of that knowledge walks out the door as well. Of course, you do what you can to capture that knowledge and do a knowledge transfer, but it's still just a very fragile system that you're relying on. Or maybe you do have some semblance of a system, but it lacks consistency and unification. The IP core requirements are maintained in different systems, maybe different requirement management repositories. Maybe they're just documented on wikis like Confluence, which comes to mind, but there's no unifying data model. And without that, this creates traceability risk when you recompile everything to build your SoC project. How can you be sure that you're completely covered and you have no traceability gaps? Now, I'm not advocating that everyone has to follow the exact same process down to the T. Some level of autonomy might be necessary for different teams managing different SoC projects, and that is necessary. But there should be some unifying model and some unifying process that teams can follow to address these different gaps and risks. Here's a slide that might resonate with you all. The current challenges you might be facing, the impact of those challenges, the goals and business outcomes are all sort of documented here. And this represents a cross-section of a lot of customers and prospects that I've been talking to in the semiconductor design industry. And the strategies that I'll discuss and impart today speak to both of those personas, a prospect that's not using Jama or an existing Jama that just needs to scale up and optimize their use of Jama. So let's look and talk about some of these challenges. Customers need to scale SoC management on Jama. Scale, that can be a vague and overused term, but what I think about when I hear this is that customers are really looking for control, a plan, and a tool with the right functionality to help them manage this complexity. Versions of IPs are scattered across multiple projects or systems. A couple things come to mind right away here: that immediate clarity when it comes to either applying a change or resolving a defect or figuring out what third-party software is being used for which project or product. It just isn't possible. Future projects are coming down the pike, requiring reusing out-of-context IPs for in-context SoC projects, possibly needing to maintain both the out-of-context IPs and then the new in-context IPs, which make up the SoC. Again, a plan, a process, and a tool are needed to support this. Let's discuss some of the impacts of these challenges. So disorganization, because you need to manage content across projects or potentially across systems, there can be just a lot of lost time, a lot of lost hours in terms of redocumenting things, and just generally a lot of confusion. There can be traceability risks, especially if the data that you're being managed does not have a unified data model, or that data is just not integrated across systems. How can you be sure there are no traceability gaps? Future projects just take longer to spin up because there's a lot of rework. Yes, you can save that content as and work from there, but syncing those changes across the different copies that you're making at scale just really isn't possible without a tool like Jama. Let's talk about some of the goals that we hope to achieve by adopting some of the strategies that I'll outline. We want to scale SoC management. And again, what I think this means is developing a plan, using a tool that can support these use cases and implement a controlled yet flexible process. Leveraging libraries and variants to compile your IPs for reuse. This will be one of the strategies that we'll discuss later on. Immediate version clarity, both for software licensing and defect and change management, and applying those changes across different projects in a scalable way. Which leads us to the outcomes. What we hope to achieve by adopting some of these strategies will streamline SoC projects coming down the pike by using and leveraging existing IP in a controlled and organized method. This will give us high quality source control using a library approach in Jama so that defects and changes can be applied to working projects at scale and easily. Maintaining licensing becomes more clear in this library managed system, and the path to regulatory compliance even can ease, because with all the processes we've adopted, the traceability risks can be mitigated and be reduced. And a look into live traceability is possible, and we'll unpack that a little bit later in the webinar today. And you can increase time to value, manage change, and increase product confidence with all of these strategies. So if you don't know where to start, if you're not organized at the moment and you feel a little bit panicked, we're going to cover a lot of these strategies that help set you at ease a bit. You might be thinking about, oh, how can I do this? What are the steps required? We're going to talk a little bit about the strategies to do that. We'll talk about the hours saved by adopting these strategies, and potentially scaling our processes to reduce rework and really put you in a better state. When we shift from these ad hoc processes with limited reuse capability, with scattered IP cores and data concerning third-party software licensing to a consistent but flexible process model with scalable reuse, with a version managed library, we can shift from the chaos of today to the control of tomorrow. And we can deliver better business outcomes and feel more confident just about what is ahead of us. When the next customer project rolls around, we can just meet that with that quiet confidence that all of our IP data is in good shape, it can be quickly reused, and we can customize from there. We'll take a deep dive into those strategies coming up. First, if I've talked to you before and showed you Jama, I love to talk about this slide to tee up the tool, especially helpful if you are new to Jama and are just unfamiliar with our features and functionality. But this is our product stack. So at our core is requirements management, and then test and risk, really core parts of the solution as well. But we're going to dig into some more advanced features today, particularly the reuse feature. We're going to talk a little bit about integrations as well as some of the key strategies that we can adopt that help us achieve this way of scaling SoCs.